Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? If so, please clap. Great. Thank you for having me this morning. I am Dr. Nicole House. I am the manager for Instructional Technology at Delta State University, and I am actually housed in the Office of Information Technology and work with the Ellucian. So we provide solutions for the school's overall information technology needs. My background, however, is in student affairs and student services. And one of the things that I do here is that I am the administrator for our campus LMS or learning management system. So my presentation today is really focused on facilitating a meaningful orientation to a learning management system. But it's based in my background of working with students in distance education, understanding how they learn, but most of all, looking for ways to impact their personal development as students. So my presentation today is Early Impact. It's a gamification approach to facilitating a meaningful online LMS orientation course. One of my favorite characters in the world, next to the green M&M, is Dr. Seuss. And one of his quotes is, "It's better to know how to learn than to know." And one of the things that I noticed in the transition from student affairs to information technology is that sometimes we're so consumed with just showing people how to do things or providing rote instructions. We're not really targeting how it is they come to know in ways that we can support their learning and development to acquire the mastery that they need with the tools. And so my approach was to think of it really in terms of teaching. From a constructivist approach, when you have learners online, it causes them to be much more engaged with the content. It also allows them to independently acquire the skills that they need to perform whatever task it is related to the knowledge we want them to receive. So that old way of tutorials and videos that show you one way to do things and never ask your opinion about it, those ways just aren't conducive to reaching our learners. One of the obstacles that, and I shouldn't say obstacles, I should say opportunities. One of the opportunities that I had in making that principle clear in designing the orientation was gaming. And there are a lot of people who say gaming is just for fun. But in this case, the game is just the framework. Our focus is on content mastery and performance. So it's not just about play, but when we think about how our students learn and what their expectations are, gaming really does matter. Okay, I'm sorry for that, but gaming really does matter. And I have been a gamer probably since I was 8 or 9 with the Atari. And when we talk about gaming, we think about specific behaviors. Game players usually exhibit some sort of persistence. They want to achieve the task. They're often risk takers, and they pay a lot of attention to detail. And in order for them to get to the next level, they have to develop some sort of problem-solving skill. All of these behaviors are important to understanding how this audience learns. Statistically, we've learned that as early as 2009, a fourth of the college students that we deal with were actually using their mobile devices to game. In that time, that number has grown dramatically. Right now, the average young person racks up over 10,000 hours of gaming by the time that they're 21 years old. And nearly 60% of those that comprise the 18 to 34-year-old group play games at least 3 times a week. Importantly, as it relates to learning, the majority of these students or individuals feel that gaming is an important learning experience that helps them to learn how to solve problems and think more constructively. That said, there is a connection with education. If you think about making gaming meaningful and focusing on content mastery, there are some common characteristics that make a game a game. And those common characteristics translate to our higher educational needs. The first of those is goals. Every game has a goal, whether it's to win a trophy, save a damsel in distress, or build a better burger. There's a goal to each game. And for us in higher education, that goal is often graduation or specific outcomes related to our quality matters. There are also challenges in each game. Students don't just progress through the levels without proving they've acquired some knowledges or powers or earned their way to the next level. So for us, our challenges are retention, persistence, and even on the customer or consumer level, we have students that are looking for a return on their investment. When they're paying their tuition, they expect some challenges along the way that they are going to have to meet so that they can become employable in the long run once they leave school. Essentially, all games have some form of community, and that's extremely important when you think about a student developmental perspective. For me, community is not just playing the game and becoming friends of the gamers in that specific game, but if you think about the whole community of gamers that are playing, I don't care if it's spades, backgammon, or Warcraft, all of these are communities of gamers or learners. And when you think about that in higher education, when a student steps onto your campus, they have an immediate sense of belonging and inclusion through the activities on campus. But for our online or distance learners who never step foot on your campus, this is a way to kind of reinforce belonging and inclusion for those learners in a virtual environment. And the last thing that I think is a major element in games or characteristic of games is engagement. Students aren't just sitting there blindly reading, following material, and getting something from it. They're actively engaged in games. They're clicking on items. They're interacting with other game mates. They're moving. They're progressing forward. And so when we think about that in higher education terms, active learning matters. We also want students to develop some sense of autonomy where they can critically think and move forward in their education. For the online learning management system, they have to be autonomous in navigating that system and being able to know how to troubleshoot maybe some basic problems. They don't have to be techs per se, but they have to be autonomous enough to manage themselves as students in the system, whether it's their time, how they do their assignments, how often they respond to discussion boards. All of those things are supported through engagement. This notion of gamification, I think, is kind of, the term itself seems rather new, but as I mentioned before, gaming has been around for a while. If we think about the term of gamification, a lot of people go to the definition that gamification occurs when you apply game design techniques to non-game contexts. I prefer to follow the definition that comes from gamification.org because there are some specific criteria that they've placed in the definition which will allow us to transfer that notion or that approach to education, I think, more wisely. Gamification is a strategy. It's a strategy. It has to have some thought and end in place. And what we're trying to do ultimately is to drive behavior. Again, it's about focusing on content mastery, not just gameplay. And I think when you leave those two elements of strategy and behavior out, and you start to implement gaming design and techniques into your course, we can sometimes forget what it is that we're meaning for students to get or do in the end. I want to talk a little bit about how we came to, or how I came to use this approach in designing a learning management system orientation. We had been a Blackboard institution and that license was expiring, so we were tasked with moving from Blackboard to our new chosen system, Canvas, in a matter of 3 months. Technically, we moved all courses in 1 month so that we could start in summer. But from May until August, you're talking about having 4,000 students on campus, up to 300 faculty, adjunct and on campus, who are needing assistance in not only migrating course content, but for the students, knowing how to navigate the new system, knowing how to access their classes, learning a whole new way to upload documents, and really take advantage of all the collaborative features that we have inside of Canvas. But previously, we had a number of, I think, video tutorials, the person who had worked here before me, and each one of those was kind of segmented to say, when you go to this assignment, click here, attach here, next video. When you go to this discussion board, click here, type here, next video. There was no interaction from OIT or the Learning Management System tutorials with the students. So no way to really engage them with the content, no way to assess what they had learned, and no way to really determine the value in those tutorials. And so our focus became reaching the students in a more meaningful way so that they could become not only comfortable with the system, but competent users of the system. And when you have more competent students who are using your LMS, that serves the institution in a number of ways. Not only do your help tickets go down, and I am over the help desk, so every time a student has an issue with uploading a document, or they can't see an assignment, or something is broken, I am the person that they email or call. So if you have a small office, there are 2 of us in the office. If you have a small office trying to service 5,000 people in help requests, how can we mitigate those problems? So this was an excellent way for us to really reach out and do that with this course. In terms of our students, their satisfaction with some of the things that we were doing with our older course, or the options that we had in our older course management system, they just weren't as satisfied. So we also wanted to improve student satisfaction. And we know that satisfaction supports retention on an institutional level, but it also supports persistence from a student perspective. And I want to talk a little bit about why I chose to really delve into building an orientation as opposed to tutorials only. I have a background in teaching orientation for academic credit at a number of institutions where it was required. It is not required here. However, there are several benefits that we have to consider in working with our students to get them comfortable with the new learning management system. The benefits are numerous for students, but as I said before, there are also benefits for your institution. The first thing that we have to consider is that having an orientation that's structured in nature as opposed to tutorials will help students become more familiar with the LMS, become more comfortable and confident. In my case, using a course outline actually mimics online course design, and so they have an idea of what to expect when they step into an actual course. I also sought to foster a sense of community. As I said, with these online learners, many of them at a distance, and we have students that are in other countries as well as other states, and they have never stepped foot on this campus, and sometimes they are not always given the opportunity to meet their classmates. So there are specific opportunities within the orientation to kind of foster our university mission to promote inclusion with our students at all levels. We also have an opportunity with an orientation to give some valuable insight to our technical needs and skills. For the students that are here, many of them are rural. I think I mentioned to Patrick earlier about an internet connection, but they have to have specific technical skills and equipment to be successful online learners. They also have to have a sense of personal commitment, and I'll talk about how I'm able to gauge that through this course a little bit later on. So we're able to not only troubleshoot some technical issues, but we're able to gauge our student commitment and ability to navigate the system both technically as well as their aptitude with the orientation. And lastly, our orientation is designed as an open enroll course. It's self-paced, so students have convenient access, and they can access that through their help button. They're not going and looking on a zillion different sites. It's there and it's easy to access anytime they want to. Dr. Seuss always says that sometimes the questions are complicated and the answers are simple. When I first talked about gamifying the orientation course, there were a lot of questions about how, what, when are you going to do this, how are you going to do it. For me, the answer was really quite simple. Once I had a thorough understanding of the gamification approach, the essential elements of a game, and more importantly, my student affairs background in understanding the importance of an orientation and that return on the investment as well as the student benefit as far as their development. The focus would be strategy that impacts behavior. And for the student who is our ultimate target or customer, our ultimate gamer, the strategies have to be intentional, and the behavior we want to influence through specific actions and goals that are relative to the education process. We want them to enjoy the course, but we also want them to have an experience where they are actually becoming masters at a task, where they are able to think critically, and where they are employed to actually engage in assignments and give me feedback on the course as well as me give them feedback. We don't want students unengaged, just viewing videos and reading manuals. I just don't, I personally don't learn very well that way. I tend to skip over things if they're too long, and I've noticed that students have done that as well in this course, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But the ultimate goal is to strategically implement activities and a course design that's going to drive student behavior in a positive way. This in mind, we were able to use an intentional framework, and I will say that synonyms sometimes help keep me grounded. So the method or the framework that we used in employing this approach is called G.A.M.E. We're looking to gauge student readiness for online learning, gauge student commitment to task completion, gauge how well students read and review information. We're also looking to address student technical needs, their concerns about the system, and address really their level of commitment as far as time on task. And so I did have some time related events in there we'll talk about a little bit later. We also were trying to motivate students to become competent users. Motivate students to learn more about using the tools. Motivate students to become engaged with their online communities. And lastly, motivate students to finish tasks. Task completion comes through management and a desire to actually achieve the next level, and we believe that this motivation would transfer to the online course environment. The last thing we sought to do was really educate. From an OIT perspective, we wanted to educate students about our services. From a campus perspective, we wanted to educate them about the services that the campus offers for online learners. And I think in some cases, when you go into an online class, students read your syllabus and they see, oh, yeah, there's some services for online students also, but when they are online in your class, we want to make sure that they are fully aware that they are entitled to all of these services that your on-campus students have. So that's been woven into this course, as well as how to access those. One of the things that I've sought to do, especially being in a rural area, is provide them with a little bit of technical guidance. So we want to educate them about being good digital citizens, how to not only upload documents, but kind of conserve space, how to cite sources, how to behave on a discussion board, and I've got some content on that later that was really interesting. But so it's really our guide for making sure that every activity that we employ has a focus on mastery and performance, not just play. In terms of gauging, I think that when anyone is designing, whether it's a course or an online class, we all game in some way, shape, or form. So I hope that you will find this information as something that will transfer across disciplines or academic forums, even if you're building an orientation to an online program or an orientation to your course, which might be quite short in nature. Readiness is really something that can be a problem if you haven't dealt with some students that are less prepared than others. It may not be as much of a problem for you, but when you encounter a number of digital natives who are, as I would say, they're digital warriors as far as playing games and using their iPhones and their iPads, but they are not digitally wise. And so they are not necessarily ready for the online learning environment. And I've been in this business maybe 15 years and about 8 years dealing with distance education and online, and it has not changed yet where students still believe that online is easier and that the students are less monitored. And so this class is giving them an opportunity to really see what their opinion is and make sure that they're ready for what the teacher will expect in the classroom. The proficiency in making sure they have access to the tools that they need and how to use those with Canvas has been really important. If you're familiar with Canvas, you may know that we have a thing called Speed Grader, where faculty can actually go in and grade documents and upload comments. Well, they have to be uploaded in a certain way. And so we have a number of students who often go out and buy new computers. Those computers have limited software or no software. So we use the orientation to point them to other tools such as Google Docs to say, okay, you can save this as a PDF, you can save this as a Word. And we make sure that they're proficient in using those tools and aware of alternate resources when they don't have the tools already at their disposal. Addressing those technical and academic needs really comes through some of those requirements that we set in the module, and requiring them to view certain items and forcing them to actually accept or allow certain settings. And meeting their interpersonal needs came through using some of the activities within Canvas to foster discussion and through a lot of the feedback that I provided personally. As far as motivating, a big part of motivating the students is providing opportunities for them to explore the LMS and to achieve specific outcomes. And I think in doing that, they've become more competent and they've been able to contribute more to the class. And a lot of the education is taken from my personal perspective of providing constructive feedback, and also not just doing tutorials but providing those in response to needs expressed, as well as a resources library. From a methods standpoint and how we want to affect outcomes, and I'm still in line with strategy and behavior. If we now look at the strategy being a specific method that we're looking for an outcome or behavior to occur, some of the instructional strategies used were showing students how to navigate in Canvas. And so that's basic modeling or lecture, and in the past that lecture would be a video tutorial or actually typing out so that you have a content page or a wiki that tells you how to navigate, and the outcome being that students will be able to really know how to access the course list and manage their personal settings. But that method itself leaves a lot of room for gamifying, and I'll talk about how I gamified that. But once you have identified your lecture or your instructional method and you've linked it to an outcome, then that gives you the framework for deciding what gaming method or tool you want to transform that activity. Another instructional strategy that we had was training students to submit. And training is usually done as an assignment. They may read the document, they may view the tutorial, and then they may have an assignment to turn in one. So there are some things there that were good, but we can do that a little bit better. The goal is that students will know how to attach various types. And building a sense of community is really done through forums. I know that a lot of classes have, introduce yourself, where are you from, but we wanted to do something a little bit different that was also educational. But we also want to encourage students to comment on peer posts as opposed to just posting to a discussion board to see if they know how to do it. And this has been one of the highlights, I think, of the course. Currently, it looks like a Twitter feed right now. There are more than 500 posts on there. So when you're looking at transforming some of those instructional methods with some game elements, Dr. Sue says, think left and think right, think low and think high. Oh, the things you can think up if you only try. If you feel overwhelmed by taking on too many tasks at once, choose one. I'll only do assignments. I'll only gamify this assignment this time. Or this time I will gamify the discussion board. But you really have to think outside the box, and you can't really limit yourself. I think that this will enable you to really devote the time that you need to developing the material. So again, that you're focusing on content mastery and not just playing a game. Once you've kind of thought about your instructional method and your outcomes, then that's the time that you want to apply those gaming elements. If you think back earlier, we had the various elements that are essential to gaming: goals, challenges, community, and engagement. So in terms of the goals element, the way that we decided to reach those or link up that element was through outcomes and badges. Challenges that were necessary. It's not just modules, but it's creating locked modules so that students feel as if they are progressing. It's meaningful assignments that use interactive media and tools. And I wrote quizzes because it's typically called a quiz button, but the quizzes inside your LMS are a start, but there are other tools that you can use to create quizzes which will make it into a game. Community, the discussion boards, and the wikis. The wikis are the content pages in your course where you allow students to comment and create in a collaborative space. And I know there are some cases where you won't have students contributing to a page for fear that they might mess things up. That has happened on a couple of my wikis. I just go in and say, hey, that's fine, and we change it or we go back. But it still engages them to kind of interact with each other freely. And lastly, engagement. So one of the highlights of my course is an inspiration module, and it has some quotes, some ideas about how to be a successful student. There's nothing academic there. Everything is there to inspire or motivate the student. So if they're having a hard day, they can click on that module and feel better about themselves. If I'm giving them feedback on an item and they didn't do so well, I may point them to a specific slide or quote in the module. Another way of engagement was the star students, and I'll show you how I recognize those. And if you think about gamification and how students persist in gaming, there are lots of students who want to be named the leader or the winner, so that's what the star student is. And then the leaderboards help identify students who are on task and going above and beyond what's required. As far as organizing the modules, our course was organized in 5 modules, and as I mentioned earlier, they had prerequisite requirements. This is essential if you're going to gamify your online orientation or any course. With those levels, you have progress indicators, which is a very key feature in games. And you see the goals and the outcomes. So before every module, there is a list of expected outcomes for this module. There's a number of indicators of where you are, including checks and where readings are required or activities are required. Students can see when they look at the module list what they have completed. The challenges in the modules were so important to making the gamification work, because every time they unlocked a module, certain things or rewards happened, whether it was earning a badge or making a high score on a quiz. The challenges were tied to unlocking the modules. The community building activities within the modules were gamified also. There's a Where's LaForge activity and the community that we built with the wiki. But the Where's LaForge activity, if you've heard of Where's Waldo, it's very similar. We have a new president on campus, and President LaForge is very charismatic. He is constantly on the go and meeting new people, but our online students don't get to experience that. And we know that where students feel a connection with the campus leaders and buy into what they're doing to move your campus forward, they have more confidence and satisfaction with the institution. So that was a big part, having them to search for LaForge through various mediums, just like the Where's Waldo activity. And engagement. Engagement occurred through student achievement recognition and ongoing constructive feedback. I stress that feedback because it's not only critical, but it's also a challenge. The student achievement recognition very much mimics games, where you see leaderboards and high scores on certain boards. And when you are a gamer that's in a community, you can see who has the most team members, who has the most wins, losses, etc. Except here, I don't focus on loss or bad grades. I want to talk a little bit about the outcomes, because they are so important, and I know that some of you may not be able to see all of this on my screen, so I will make sure that it's downloaded for your use later. The outcomes are so important. They are what define everything that you do. They need to be clearly defined for each module, and in this case, because my focus is on achieving specific objectives, I aligned outcomes and activities using Canvas's outcomes tool. And with the rubrics that I created, when I aligned the outcomes, I was able to establish content mastery for the students. Again, this is not about gameplay. It's about content mastery and how we can ensure that our students are getting the most out of an orientation. And so one of those, an example that I have is from that Where's LaForge. The thing that's helpful is that in Canvas you not only have the student that's able to look at those outcomes and view their progress as if it were a game. There are also indicators, color indicators, to let them know if they're on task or if they've achieved a certain level or not. The outcome for them will be yellow if it's in progress, it'll be green if they've achieved it, and red if they've not mastered it. For me, I have a content mastery gradebook that shows me those outcomes and the number of students who have achieved those. I can get a quick view with a pie chart, and I can see with my administrative connection outcome to support engagement that I have 61% who've exceeded expectations. And to note that they've exceeded expectations is aligned or tied to a rubric that I specifically developed to gauge mastery for that. So by using these outcomes correctly and taking that data, we're able to shape exercises and opportunities to see if they're really effective. Gaming takes time. It takes a certain amount of commitment from the course developer. So if you're doing something and there's not something to show for it, you really don't want to do it. But if you're doing something and you're not reaching students or they're not mastering the content, then maybe you should do it differently. So this is a very important element that we cannot overlook. The badges were also essentially important in not only the challenges, but in engagement also. I know there's a lot of talk about badges being overused and maybe perhaps they're getting old. I am a person who believes, they're borderline for old, but what I found is my students like them, my students download them, and I have developed a number of different looks and designs so that they kind of display properly or cleanly, and the cleaner the badges, the more they seem to like them and download them. One of the badges badge tools that I've used recently is Canva badges. And the reason I say trial and error with the badges is because badge award systems can be quite difficult to work with in some systems. And I don't believe that you should spend too much time on navigating how to use a badge tool when you should be focusing on the content. If you have modules that are built, you can create your own badges and place them in a locked module. You don't necessarily have to use a system. The Canva badges system, however, allows me to not only develop and create the badge, but to narrate the badge so that I can show specifically where it is aligned to, and I can set the requirements in the modules so that they must complete those before the badge will open. And so this kind of saves me time. If you're not able to use a tool such as that, you can always create a locked module that will unlock when students have completed the prior module. And one of the things that we are trying to do is to get the badges to display globally so that students are not forced to repeat information. So it's kind of been trial and error with this, but so far it is going well. And just last week I had maybe 50 students went in and selected this badge to display. And so once they collect their badges, they're all housed in a backpack so they can see every achievement that they've gotten along the way in the course. Another important point is the interaction and feedback. I heard a little bit in the presentation earlier, does every student deserve feedback? And I believe that every student deserves feedback. However, this has been somewhat of a mini MOOC for me because there have been as many as 300 students in here at one time. And so when they're all posting on a discussion board and they're all turning in assignments, it is very hard to reply and respond to each one of those posts and each one of those assignments. But I do make a point to reply to at least one assignment from each student so that every student knows there's a person behind the course, so that every student knows that OIT is not just a computer that's teaching them how to use the computer, so they know there's a person there, and so that they can connect with me. I do have Holly Berry as my avatar, and so some of them are a little bit disappointed when they meet me in person, but while they're in the course, they can really connect with the person, though, and not just think it's an office or a machine. I'm constantly thanking students. I thank them for embedding video. I thank them for going the extra step, because there are some students who have volunteered to enroll in this course, and there are other students whose teachers have made them. Those students are sometimes less participatory than the ones who have volunteered, and so I really embrace those who have gone the extra step by not only embedding videos but making comments to their peers, and so I'm encouraging them and I'm thanking them at the same time. On the discussion boards, I do respond to individual posts as often as possible. Some of those posts are not so positive all the time, and so I have to use constructive criticism in talking to them. I use pictures, I use links so that they can click and engage with my response if needed. And one of the things that I love is seeing how students respond to one another, whether it's on the discussion board or in the wiki. And in one of those discussion boards, I have students view a Netiquette document and talk about what they learned, and they're encouraged to comment to other students. And so I can see when students make really good points, other students say, oh yeah, that's right, or oh, I never thought about that. And I have some students who actually have teachable moments for me, because they pull things out and say things that I never even thought of, and make me think about what's on the board so that I can make it better for the next class. But it's ongoing, and it is a task to keep up with all of the comments and the activities that come in. And so you have to set time aside if you're a person who's going to manage this type of environment, so that students do feel that you're interacting with them and that they do feel that it's meaningful because they're getting feedback from you. A big part of it is also that recognition. And so I use announcements, and those announcements are congratulatory in nature. Again, it's an open enrollment. There's no end to it, and students work at their own pace. But when you have 300 students in a class, I try to encourage them to finish. So I reward people who finish early, finish by the first week, the second week, third week, fourth week. I do it as long as I can. And a typical class finishing in a week is about 50 students. That means that they've completed all of the activities that they have to in the course. But most students will stay in the course or re-enroll because they're still engaged with material or they're engaging with other students. So I give them that option to remove them or keep them there. So if you think about that, that shows that they're engaged. Why would you want to be in a place that you don't have anything due as far as homework? I've done awards, Star Student, the MVPs. I recognize those students with their first name and just the last initial. I don't put their whole name out there. That's my leaderboard. They also get this certificate of completion at the end when they've completed all the assignments. But to encourage them to finish even more, I give them personalized certificates with their names and my real signature and some other things. And so students really want those. And I've had a number of teachers say, well, why did so-and-so show me this certificate as opposed to this one? So they like the personalization, and they like knowing or feeling that they've achieved a little bit more than their classmates. This has all been really a lesson for me, and sometimes you never know the value of a moment. I enjoy teaching. Well, not teaching, I say facilitating and coaching. I've enjoyed facilitating this course. I've enjoyed coaching students, and after I finished the first year, I really had some things to think about. When you go back to the goals, the challenges, community, and engagement, all those things that are related to gamification and using game elements, thinking about the tools that I used. I used bulbs for the challenge, Voki for goals. I also used Voki Presenter, which is an addition to Voki. It's something I paid for, so it's not free, but it's an investment in myself and in my ultimate goals, and it's paid off. As far as the blubber for the challenges, I used Pixiclips to re-engage students. I used our LMS tools. I didn't just put up assignments, but there's HTML editor that allowed me to embed interactive content. There are inline media tools, so being able to really take advantage of those tools to create a sense of community engagement were really important. I used open badges and Canva badges for the challenges and engagement, and another tool that I used inside the system was the outcomes. So even though students don't have those badges right now in their profile, faculty can look at the student and click on the outcomes button and see those outcomes. And so that's really important for us institutionally, so they might see where their students might have a problem. I also, when I noticed my outcome for grades, it really shaped how I revamped the training material. I use PowerPoint really as an engagement tool for our certificates, and then I used to go animate for more engagement and challenges. The findings for me in working with this course were really, like I said, it's been a good experience, but I will really use some of my findings to up the course and update some of the material that's there, and really work with creating an even more engaging and interactive course in the future. I did find that the more interactive the content was related to the subject matter, because let's face it, if you're reading an IT manual or how to use a system, it can get rather boring. So they don't have the attention span that, well, I don't know that we have the attention span, but the higher or the more interactive the content, the higher the assessment scores, the greater the masteries. Perhaps they spent less time reading, more time engaged, and so they were able to master the content matter a little bit better, and that's the ultimate goal: performance and content mastery. Students spent an average of 3 to 5 more minutes on the interactive pages than the content only. They kind of just clicked through some of those content only, and so that was really important. One of the things that I noticed, which again, it gives me some ground for upgrading the course in the future, I removed a blubber on my section on grading and how to understand those, and my student mastery for understanding how to manage their grades in the LMS fell from 75% to less than 20%. This was an eye-opener for me, because if students are not able to understand their grades in the LMS, then this creates a number of issues and problems. They will often tell the teacher their grade is higher than it is. They will challenge what is posted in Banner with what's in Canvas, and they will often assume that they've passed the class or they've done enough to pass when they haven't, and some of them will stop working. So this is something that I changed immediately. I also noted that 98% of the students achieved mastery in navigating Canvas and tool usage. Canvas itself is user-friendly, but our goal for them to become more competent and confident was achieved just through my findings with our outcomes report. And one of the most important things I also noted was students really liked personalized attention, but they did not like so much repeating tasks. So if I had a discussion board here, they didn't want a discussion board there. or their comments were quite different. I've also talked to a number of students. I held an ice cream social with the provost, and some of those students on campus who were taking the course actually came in, and we talked about some things that worked and some things that didn't. And so that qualitative data was really important. So they're looking for variety and diversity in content as well as interaction. I will say that I also met a real goal of engaging those off-campus learners. I had some of my announcements set up so that students can reply to those. And I found that those students at a distance, particularly those from Vancouver, British Columbia, they were much more engaged than our on-campus students. They were encouraged to post once to appear, but a number of those would post 3 and 4 times, and they would also comment positively to announcements. So I was really excited about that because that's really important with those learners who are not here. I did have some challenges. It's a small office, and my number one priority is to become or be the LMS administrator. So if you are operating a course, a class, it needs to be updated regularly, especially when you have an LMS that is going through updates, buttons are changing or moving. So you've got to have the class updated, and you've got to have somebody that's going to interact. In terms of managing the browser updates, some of the tools that I was using, when your browser updates and those settings change, the HTTP over the PS, so I had to learn those shortcuts myself to making those things work. I was really shocked and appalled when I went in one day and didn't see any of my Vokies, and I spent a lot of time with those. So being able to manage those updates and ensuring that your content is available and working is important. I think for students, creating that buy-in for a non-credit course. They're not getting academic credit for this, so why should they take it? Why should they feel it's important? So you've got to foster an environment that promotes buy-in among the learners. And I think finally, if you're thinking about doing a certificate or a badge, how can you recertify students who've already gone through this content? As I mentioned earlier, I learned that students don't like repeating the same things over. And so if they need a refresher next year, what will be the next level to the course or the next badge that they can achieve so that they are not experiencing redundant or outdated or useless information. So that's a challenge we'll all have going forward. Here, I'll leave these references here for your use, and these are links to some course samples from some of the tools that I use. The Pixiclip was used as a method to address those falling grades or lack of understanding with the grades, so that will be useful. And the Blubber Trib is really one that I did for, I think, faculty, but so that you can get the experience of what a blub trib is like and fill that environment for yourself as well as the presentation. So, and that is the end. Do you have any questions for me? I can't tell. I see something in my comment box. Okay. If you have no questions, can you clap for me? Okay.